Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to get going on the next chapter, Chapter 5. But before we do that, I want to show you a cool little program I came across here. Okay, it's supposed to be a CS quiz, and let's run it and just see what happens here. Okay, who's the first computer scientist is what it's prompting me in the terminal. I don't know. Bill Gates, maybe? All right, wrong. Looks like it's prompting me again, who's the first computer scientist. Okay, so it's giving me another chance to answer this question. I don't know, is it that guy from the Imitation Game movie? Let's try that. All right, cool, we got it correct. Wait a minute, something's wrong here. Okay, let's take a look at what's happening with this program. Okay, that guy from the Imitation Game is not the first computer scientist. So let's see what's going on. In the main method, we've got a scanner. And then it's going to prompt me who's the first computer scientist and store my answer, okay, from the scan.nextLine method as a string called ants. And then it's checking if ants.equals George Boole, who was the first computer scientist, is not correct. Okay, so if that's not true, it's going to say wrong, prompt me again, and rescan the answer. And then once that is done, it's going to print correct. Okay, so now the issue with this is it's going to give me a second chance, but no matter what, it's going to say correct after the second try, whether I got it right or wrong. And what we'd actually like to do with this is keep re-asking that question. Okay, keep saying wrong, who is the first computer scientist, until the user gets it right. Okay, the trick for that is going to be using a loop, using something called a while loop. And basically it works the exact same way as an if statement, except for instead of if, I'm going to say while. And what's going to happen then is if this condition is true, it's going to run the code between the braces, just like the if statement does. But the trick is with a while loop, every time it's done running, it doesn't move on to the next spot. It loops back around and checks the condition again. And then once again runs the code if that condition's true. Okay, so you can think of a while loop as a if statement that repeats itself until the condition's false. Let's compile that. Let's run that. Let's see if this works better. Who's the first computer scientist? Bill Gates. Wrong. Go again. That guy from the Imitation Game, Alan Turing. I don't think there's an N. Wrong. Go again. Neo. Wrong. Go again. All right, so now I can go to Google. I can look it up. It was George. Boole. Okay, the guy who Booleans are named after. Okay, correct. We got it correct. So that's what we're talking about today in section 5.1, the while loop. Now, chapter 5 is going to be about loops in general, or iteration. Okay, would be the fancy word for that, looping. But we'll start off with Java's most basic type, while loops, and then we'll build up from there. So here we go with that. So as far as the definition goes, we'll say a while loop is a block of code associated with a condition, and as long as the condition is true, the loop will continue to run the block of code. So again, it works a lot like a conditional statement, a lot like if there's just an if statement here. Instead, though, we have while, we have a Boolean condition, something that will evaluate to true or false. And then between my braces goes that block of code that runs as long as that condition is true. Now, as far as visualizing the flow of a program when we have a while loop, okay, as we come into the while loop, again, we will evaluate that Boolean condition. If it's false, we'll just move on. We'll skip the code in the loop. But if it's true, we'll have some kind of action we'll take. And then the code within the braces will run. And then every time that's run, we'll loop back around and check this Boolean condition, whether it's true or not. If it's false, we'll move on. But as long as it's true, we'll keep on running through that while loop. So let's walk you through the execution of a simple while loop. We've got a int variable called run. We'll start at 0. And then the first thing we'll do when we get to this while loop is we'll check the condition if run is less than 5. Okay, run right now is 0. So condition is true. we will run the code within that set of braces. Run gets run plus 1, so we're counting up on run, and then we're going to print run, so we get a 1 there. Okay, we could say we've just been through one iteration of the loop. We've gone through the loop one time. And then again, with the while loop, we'll go back to checking the condition. Okay, right now we're basically printing what run is. Okay, so run's 1 right now. That is true as well. So once again, we'll run the code. We'll print the 2. We'll go back to check the condition. Still true. Run the code. Print the 3. Back to check the condition. It is still true. Run the code. Print the 4. Back to check the condition. Okay, so the loop just keeps on going round and round and round until that condition is false. Okay, once again it's true. We'll run the code again. We'll get the 5. Okay, we'll go back to check the condition again. Right now run is 5. That's what just printed. Okay, run is not less than 5. The condition is now false. So we'll skip the code and move on to what happens after the while loop, printing the done. Okay, so again, simple example of running through a while loop step by step. We'd say each time through is an iteration, and that'll be part of what you will see on the AP exam is tracing through loops, tracing through while loops, and figuring out what they output, what the variable values are, okay, what they do to the program. Next thing we're going to do is take a look at some common mistakes that you want to avoid while writing while loops. Let's see what we have going on for the first one. So we have 2 variables, a counter and a total. Our loop's going to run while count is less than 10. And it looks like what this loop's going to do is it's going to add the count to total every time and then print off the total. So we have a short little program that's going to accumulate numbers and print them off. Okay, here's the issue with this one. Notice within the braces, my count never gets updated. Okay, I'm failing to update the variable associated with the Boolean condition, in other words. So count's never going to change, meaning that this loop's going to continue running forever. We have an infinite loop, all right, and it's going to eventually crash our program when we run out of memory. Okay, so a big thing to watch for is that if you have a variable within your Boolean condition, you need to make sure that variable is being updated some way, shape, or form within your braces so you don't have an infinite loop. So our next example has a similar issue with it. Okay, it'll turn into another infinite loop. So same idea, basically same program where we have a count and a total. We're going to continue to add the count to the total. But then this time the difference is I kind of fixed the issue from the last program where I am actually updating the value of count. Looks like I'm counting up by 2s every time. Okay, notice though, one thing I changed on this one, I said I want to count while, or I want to keep my loop going while count is not equal to 10. So in other words, I want to count up to 10. Here's the problem though. I started count as 1, so if I count by 2s, I'll end up with 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19. We'll keep on counting up. We're never going to actually hit that 10 here. Okay, so we kind of missed this condition because we weren't counting by the right amount. Okay, so something to watch for. Now, in general, it's not a great idea to use the equal equals or the not equals within the Boolean condition for a while loop. Okay, it's a better defensive programming decision to use greater than or equals or less than or equals. Okay, if I rewrote this as while count is less than or equal to 10, when I got to the 11, it would catch that and it would end my program rather than having an infinite loop. Let's quickly take a look at one more common mistake. Now, it looks like I fixed my program here. I'm counting by 1 every time, and I'm going to run my loop while count is less than 5. Okay, so we've ensured that we're not going to have an infinite loop this time around. No way for that to happen. But let's take a look at what the problem is here. This time, notice count started off at 10. So when I get into this loop, we're going to run it while count is less than 5. In this program, count's never less than 5, meaning that this loop will be skipped entirely and never run once. Okay, so that's something you need to watch for when you're creating these, especially as you're linking them to other variables in your program. Okay, you want to make sure that if you actually do want that loop to run, your variables or your Boolean condition going in will ensure that it does at least run once. Now, that could be an intentional design kind of decision, where this loop may run in some cases, may be skipped completely in others. Okay, but again, something to watch for. If you want your loop to run, you need to make sure that the variables going into that condition, okay, are set up properly. A couple more things we're going to talk about with regards to while loops. First one we'll say is prompting with a while loop. Now what I have here is just the same program we started class off with, that kind of interactive computer science quiz. And while loops are a great and simple way to turn your programs into something dynamic that's going to continually interact with, adapt to user input. Our chatbot project we just got done with for the last chapter, basically what was running that and what was making that chatbot continually talk to you was a while loop. Okay, here's an example of a quiz. It was pretty simple to add multiple questions to this and keep it going for a score, okay, just by updating some variables within the loop. Okay, we'll see some examples of games we create later in the year, okay, which will have while loops basically running them. Okay, and the overall kind of pattern to that is we'll prompt the user for something, we'll update a variable with that prompt, and then we can make our program respond based on the value of that variable. In this case, if it's not the correct answer, we could prompt again, okay, so in other words, ask for another input, store that answer, and then make our program respond to it. All right, so while loops are great for continually prompting the user to make our programs interactive. What I want to do next is show you kind of my favorite dirty trick in Java to clean that process up, to make it run a little bit smoother. I'm going to call that a loop and a half. Okay, so this isn't an example of a loop and a half here. This is just to get you thinking about it. So what I have here essentially is another quiz game where we have a scanner and a secret number of 13. And we're going to ask the user to guess the number and store their guess in ants. And then while the answer is not equal to the secret number, we'll continually ask them to guess another number, store that answer, check it again. Okay, so essentially the same thing we just looked at, little simpler code, little simpler example. Okay, here's the thing I don't like about the program I have on the board for you, is notice there's some repeated code in it. We have the same lines for the guess a number and store the answer both before the loop and within the loop. It'd be nice if we could clean that up, and we'll show you how in the next couple of slides. Okay, so in this example, I've kind of cleaned that up. I've moved all my prompting and all of my getting the answer from the user within the loop. And the way I've accomplished that is I've created a flag variable, okay, a Boolean flag variable that we just set to false. And we'll say while the flag equals false, we'll ask for a number, we will store the number, and then within here we'll check and see if the answer is equal to the secret number. If it is, we'll set our flag to true. So if this is true, then if we got the right number, we'll check, the loop won't run, and we'll move on with our program. Kind of a solution. Now we avoided repeating some code here, the prompt and the actual getting the answer. However, we had to add a whole bunch of other code. We had to add an extra variable. We had to add an extra conditional. I'd say this doesn't really make my program any simpler. Okay, here's how I can do that though, basically with the same thing, the same idea. All right, now here is a properly done loop and a half structure. Notice going into the loop, we don't have any code before it dealing with the answer or the prompt. We're just going to say while true. Now this might seem like a bad idea to make a loop that runs as long as true is true. Because in other words here I'm creating an infinite loop that's just going to run forever. But here's how we can avoid it and actually make it stop. So while true, so our loop's going to run. We're going to say guess a number. We're going to grab the user's input. And then here's the trick that actually makes this all work. We'll say if ants equals secret number. So in other words, if we got it right, within our loop and a half structure, we're just going to use this break statement. Okay, break is a keyword in Java that essentially just ends a loop. It kills a loop in its tracks and moves on after it. Okay, so essentially what we're doing here is we're creating an infinite loop with this while true, but we're going to break out of it if some condition is correct. Okay, this is our loop and a half structure. Okay, usually where it shows up is within prompting the user, but there are some other places where it might be tricky to kind of make the variable interaction happen. It might be kind of a tricky conditional right here. So what you can do is make an infinite loop and then just break out of it when the condition you're looking for is true. All right, so next thing, let's jump over to Moodle and pull up a coding demonstration and kind of run you through using some while loops quick. So, Unit 5.1 while loops. I'm going to pull up a coding demonstration. And here we're going to work on something pretty similar to what we did in the last unit or a few units ago, removing a word from a sentence or removing one string from another string. The difference here is that we want to make it continually remove the words until all instances of them are out. Okay, so for example, this just says complete the remove word method, which removes all occurrences of word from sentence. So if I go to run this, I have a sentence which is I was in math and we had a test. The word is and what I want to do is I want to remove all occurrences of that word from this sentence. Okay, again, we've written code before that would remove one occurrence of the word. We're going to make that a little better here by making it remove all occurrences. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into that remove word method here, which is all set up for us. So I guess first thing I want to do is I want to find word in the sentence. So I'm going to figure out the index. I'm going to create a variable for that. We'll say int index equals sentence dot index of word. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make another variable for the length of word. That'll be something I have to use as I go through here. Don't need to do this, but it'll make life easier. Int, we'll say length equals word dot length. And then what I'm going to do is make my while loop. And I'm actually going to start off, instead of saying while, we'll just say if. Okay, sometimes when writing a while loop, it's helpful to think of it just as a single condition, and then you'll get the loop going as you keep going. So let's basically start off by copying the same thing we've done before. So we'll say if index is greater than or equal to 0. So in other words, if word shows up in the sentence, well, what do we want to do? We want to modify sentence. I'm going to say sentence is equal to sentence with that word removed. So what we'll do is we'll make two substrings, one for everything before where the index is and one for everything after. We'll scroll up here a little bit. So we'll say sentence gets sentence dot substring. Whoops. Fix some typos as we go. Sentence dot substring. And we want to do the beginning of the sentence before the word shows up. So we'll say 0 to index. So that'll give us everything before the occurrence of that word. And then plus, we need everything after the word. So we'll say sentence dot substring. And where we want to pick up at is after our word. So that's going to be at index. But then we need to account for the length of the word. That's why I made this length variable here. So we'll just say plus length. And then remember, my substring method has two different variations. It has a two-parameter method, which has the beginning and the end of the substring, or the single parameter method, where if I only put a single parameter in, it will start off at the index I give it and just go through the rest of the substring. Through the rest of the string, sorry. Okay, since I want the rest of the sentence here, that's going to be the version I use. And I think we're good to go for now. Again, what we just created here is a method that's going to remove the first occurrence of that word. We'll get into removing them all in a second here. Let's compile, see if I don't have any typos. Ah, no. Can I find symbol, sentence, dot, susstring. I spell good. Compile. Yep, let's run that. And we'll see what we have. Yep, so I ran it with I was in math, and we had a test. It looks like it did get rid of that first here. Okay, so we're on the right track. Let's switch this around so it removes all of them. So what we'll do is we'll flip it to a while loop. And you might be tempted to just run it at this point, but nope, there's one other thing I have to do. Since my while condition is based on the value of index, I do need to make sure I update index every time this loop runs. So after we recreate the sentence, after we remove the first word, what we'll do is we'll find the index again. We'll say index gets sentence dot index of word once again. So now what we'll do is we will find the next occurrence of that word in sentence. And I suppose if it's not there, it'll be a -1, and this loop won't run a second time. Okay, compile that. Run that. We'll see what happens. I was in math, and we had a test. Sweet. So it looks like I removed all the all right, from this original sentence here. Okay, now one issue I'm noticing is notice that it looks like there's double spaces where I remove those and there's actually an additional space at the beginning of my string. Okay, so this is something where it's okay if you write your method and then realize, oh shoot, we're missing something. So what I need to do is when I remove that there's going to be a space before it and after it. I just need to remove one of those spaces. I believe I can do that just by going +1 for the length. Okay, so that's going to start my second substring one more than where just the word ends. Compile. Run. Yep, looks like that worked better. So for example, when I took out this between the in and the math, yep, there's one space now there instead of two. Okay, so we just improved our method. Again, there's nothing wrong with guessing and checking a little bit, trying things, getting yourself in the ballpark. And a lot of times, especially with strings, you'll adjust things by adding one or subtracting one to get exactly what you're looking for. All right, so there you go. That's it for our section on while loops. Start working on some programs, start cranking out some code, get through the homework, start going through the coding exercises, and like usual, if you're getting stuck somewhere, let us know. We're here to help you out.